It all began on a cold December morning when the airport was buzzing with the chaos of holiday travel. Families rushed through security with strollers and toys, college students dragged oversized suitcases, and the loudspeaker constantly called for final boarding. Amid this frenzy stood Emma Walker, clutching her economy ticket to a flight that would take her back to her hometown for Christmas. She hadn't seen her parents in over 2 years, and this trip was more than just a holiday. It was her chance to mend strained family ties, especially with her mother, who had been hurt when Emma decided to leave law school to follow her passion for teaching art. She was nervous, excited, and exhausted all at once. But she had no idea that a single decision at the boarding gate would change the entire trajectory of her life. The gate attendant announced that the flight was overbooked, and tensions rippled through the passengers. Complaints flew in the air, voices rising in frustration. Emma felt her stomach tighten. She needed to be on that plane. Every fiber of her being told her this trip mattered more than anything. Yet, just as she was about to step forward to insist on her seat, she noticed a man standing a few feet away. He was in his mid-30s, disheveled, his suit jacket wrinkled, his tie loosened as if he had worn it for far too many hours. In his arms, he cradled a little girl, no more than 5 years old, her head slumped against his chest, her tiny hands clutching a stuffed rabbit. The man's eyes were red-rimmed, filled with fatigue and something deeper, a quiet desperation. Emma's gaze lingered. She could have ignored it, could have stayed silent and looked away like everyone else. But her heart ached at the sight. She knew what exhaustion looked like. Her father had once worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, and she remembered the weary slump of his shoulders when he came home at night. Without overthinking, she stepped forward, her voice steady but gentle. "Excuse me," she said to the gate attendant. "He can take my seat. I'll wait for the next flight." The man's head shot up, surprise flashing in his eyes. "You don't have to do that," he said quickly, his voice hoarse, carrying the weight of pride and gratitude all at once. "You've probably got somewhere important to be." But Emma shook her head with a small smile. "So do you, and I think she needs it more than I do," she said, nodding toward the sleeping child. The attendant processed the change, and within minutes the man was ushered onto the plane with his daughter, throwing Emma a look of disbelief and gratitude that etched itself into her memory. She sat down in the waiting area, her flight now delayed by 4 hours, a small sting of inconvenience settling in, but in her chest, a warmth bloomed. She had no idea who the man was, only that helping him felt right. Hours later, Emma finally boarded a different plane, weary and frustrated, but still holding on to the image of that tired father and his little girl. She arrived in her hometown late at night, hugging her parents tight at the airport. The reunion was emotional, filled with apologies, laughter, and the comfort of being home. Her mother, though still wary of her decisions, softened as the days went by, especially when Emma set up a little art activity for the neighborhood children on Christmas Eve. For Emma, kindness was never about recognition, it was about living her values. She thought she'd never see that man again. But life has a strange way of weaving unexpected threads. 2 weeks later, back in the city, Emma returned to her modest routine, working at a local art center, teaching kids from underprivileged backgrounds how to paint, sculpt, and express themselves. It wasn't glamorous, and it certainly wasn't lucrative, but it filled her with purpose. One Friday afternoon, she was tidying up after a messy class of 7-year-olds when her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She hesitated before answering, her hands still smudged with paint. "Miss Walker," came a deep, polished voice. "This is Daniel Mercer. I believe you gave up your seat for me and my daughter at the airport last month." Emma froze, the memory rushing back. "Oh, yes, of course. How are you both doing?" she asked, genuinely surprised he remembered her. "We're well, thanks to you," he said, a smile audible in his tone. "I never properly thanked you. I'd like to. Could we meet for coffee?" Emma hesitated. She wasn't used to strangers reaching back into her life, but there was a sincerity in his voice she couldn't dismiss. They agreed to meet the next morning at a quiet cafe downtown. When she walked in, she almost didn't recognize him. He was impeccably dressed now, a sharp navy suit, clean-shaven, every detail polished. Beside him sat his daughter, bright-eyed and clutching the same stuffed rabbit. He stood as she approached, a charming smile lighting up his face. "Emma," he said warmly, extending a hand. "I'm Daniel Mercer, and this is Lily." Emma shook his hand, still stunned by the transformation. "Nice to meet you both properly," she said. They sat, and conversation flowed easily. Daniel explained that he had been traveling with Lily after a particularly grueling business trip when she fell ill mid-journey. He had been desperate to get her home quickly, and Emma's sacrifice had meant the world. As they spoke, Emma pieced together the truth. Daniel wasn't just any tired father. He was the CEO of Mercer Enterprises, a multi-million-dollar company. The realization left her momentarily speechless. She had unknowingly given her ticket to one of the most powerful men in the city. But Daniel didn't carry himself like the typical CEOs Emma had imagined. He was warm, attentive, and deeply human, especially with Lily, who leaned against him as they spoke. What began as a thank-you meeting turned into a friendship. Daniel insisted on visiting Emma's art center, curious about her work. When he saw her classroom, a cramped basement with peeling paint, worn brushes, and kids whose laughter masked difficult home lives, something shifted in him. He was moved by Emma's dedication, the way she poured her soul into children society often overlooked. He offered to fund supplies, but Emma declined at first, wary of handouts. "These kids need consistency, not charity that comes and goes," she said firmly. But Daniel respected her honesty, and instead, they brainstormed sustainable ways to grow the program together. Yet, it wasn't all smooth. Emma found herself conflicted. She admired Daniel's generosity, but part of her feared being overshadowed by his wealth. She wanted to stand on her own, not be a project of his philanthropy. Meanwhile, Daniel wrestled with his own challenges. Beneath his polished exterior was a man still grieving the loss of his wife, Lily's mother, who had passed away 2 years earlier. His work had consumed him, leaving him guilt-ridden for the times he wasn't fully present for Lily. Meeting Emma had stirred something in him, a reminder of the power of compassion, the kind he had nearly forgotten in his corporate world. Over the months, their bond deepened. Emma became a mentor figure to Lily, teaching her to paint and channel her emotions into art. In turn, Daniel began volunteering his time at the center, much to the surprise of everyone who saw a CEO sitting cross-legged on the floor with kids, helping them build cardboard castles. Slowly, Emma's walls came down, and Daniel's heart began to heal. But challenges loomed. When news broke in the media about Daniel's involvement with a small community art center, rumors swirled. Critics accused him of using charity as a publicity stunt. Emma's program faced unwanted attention, and some parents grew suspicious of her motives. It hurt her deeply, and she considered stepping away to protect her students. But Daniel stood by her side. At a tense parent meeting, he spoke not as a CEO, but as a father. He shared how Emma's kindness at the airport had changed him, how her art center wasn't about fame or fortune but about children finding their voices. His words turned the tide, and the parents began to see the truth. Together, Emma and Daniel weathered the storm, their partnership stronger for it. As time passed, what had begun as a simple act of kindness grew into something neither of them had expected. Daniel, once a weary father on the verge of collapse, found renewed purpose in Emma's world of colors and creativity. Emma, once doubting her worth after leaving behind her family's expectations, found affirmation in Daniel's unwavering belief in her mission. And Lily, sweet, resilient Lily, found not just a mentor in Emma, but the beginnings of a new family. The story reached its quiet climax one evening during the Art Center's first official exhibition, funded sustainably through a foundation Daniel helped create but led entirely by Emma. Children proudly showcased their paintings and sculptures, parents beamed, and the room buzzed with life. Emma stood at the center, overwhelmed by the sight of her dream taking shape. Daniel approached her, Lily at his side, and for a moment, the noise faded. "You know," he said softly, "none of this would have happened if you hadn't given up your ticket that day." Emma smiled, tears welling in her eyes. "Funny how one small choice can change everything," she whispered. The lesson lingered long after the exhibition lights dimmed. Life's most powerful moments often arise not from grand gestures but from quiet acts of kindness, the kind that ripple outward in ways we can't begin to imagine. Emma had given up a seat, thinking it was just a small sacrifice. In return, she gained a purpose deeper than she had ever known, a bond with a father and daughter who became family, and a love that was built not on wealth or status, but on shared humanity. And so, the story of Emma and Daniel became a living reminder. You never know the battles others are fighting, nor the hidden blessings your compassion might unlock. Sometimes, the seat you give up today leads you exactly where you were meant to be tomorrow.